Care is the four-letter word that we're talking about in 2021. And today we'd like to thank Onsite Wellness and Consumers for the presentation. I got to tell you, we got a great cast of presenters for you today. Today is focusing on team care. Last week, we focused on self-care. And that video is already up on our website at consumercu.org/video. And today we're going to focus on team care, learning tips to improve your internal, external teams. And now this can be teams that you work with. It could be your family teams. Perhaps you have teams that you are coaching and or work with in church. So there's many, many ways that we have teams, but we have experts today that are going to focus a lot about leadership and helping you lead teams that you have, not only in work, but also in life. So it's a very exciting time. And then next week, we have community care, and we have specialists who are going to talk about how you can focus on volunteering, on caring for the community that in help, well, it's going to come back to team care and self-care. It's like a round, you know, kind of like the Lion King circle of life. It's a little Simba. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Let's introduce our panelists today. We have Carrie Yunker. She's the Executive Vice President of Bell's Inspired Brewing. I'm telling you, it's inspiring me just thinking about it, Carrie. I know it's been quite a year, so we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Grant Fletcher is the System Director for Healthy and Living Sustainability at Bronson. And he just mentioned, if you're on a little bit earlier, his walk to work, which is a wonderful thing. It's talking about how you can bring, well, really, it's what your job is, Grant. So that's exciting. We're looking forward to talking with you. Amy Ritzma is co-owner of Onsite Wellness. She was with us last week. She's again with us today. And she has some wonderful focuses on making sure that you look at the tips you can actually do that will work. And I think that's what you're going to really love today. We're going to do a couple of round robins where we're going to find out what it is that's working in the office environment, in the family home environment, and what's not. And then finally, my dear friend Shawn Primer, she's the Chief Human Resources Officer of Consumers Credit Union. And she's nationally recognized for all of the work that she's been doing on the HR front. So thank you all four for joining us. We're going to start right in. We have focused last week on talking about self-care and what a year it has been in our life. We keep thinking it's going to change, that any moment we're going to wake up and all of a sudden the mask mandate, you will be able to wear one or you won't. It gets to be your choice, right? Vaccines are everywhere and we're so excited. Well, right now that's still not happening. So there's many people that are still working remote. And it's tough. It's difficult. We know that. So today we're going to focus a little bit first, and I'm going to first start off with you, Shawn. I absolutely have loved all of the ways that you have been helping consumers, teams, stay passionate and connected. Why is that so important, and what is it that you're doing to keep that ball rolling?
Sure. Well, it's important because a passionate and engaged employee is the driver of business success, right? We all know that when our employees come to work and they feel passionate about what they do and they're engaged, they serve your customers better, they serve each other better, and it just creates a good positive culture, right? We can have good culture or bad culture. We want a positive one, and the only way to get that is with passionate and engaged employees. That gets more challenging when you have employees working remote, or a combination of employees working remote and working on site. So I'm going to just go through some simple things that we have done, or some simple tips I have for you that might be able to resonate in your organizations. But the first thing I will say is don't give up your traditions. Find a new way to do them. So in our organization, we've always had a networking event. We do an employee conference. We've had global, calls. We do town halls. We do all of these things as an organization to help our employees stay informed and connected. So we just had to find a new way to do them through COVID-19 challenges, right, that we're still in today. So our networking event was a virtual toast. And we had employees grab their favorite beverage. Hopefully it was from Bell's, right, Carrie? And we had a toast to the successes of the year. And we, in advance of the event, we sent everybody a box full of treats so that they could enjoy them during the event and put their toast in their new, consumers, mug or cup. So, it was really about finding a way to connect us all together. And that's one of the things we did. But we've also done global calls as much as weekly during this time when we need to. And it's a video call, so the CEO can be seen and heard, because we're not seeing him on site the way we usually do, right? We've done team meetings and team connections, and we held our conference virtually. And again, sent employees a box of things to get them excited, and then held the event virtually, and then did a volunteer afternoon following, because that's part of passion and connection, is giving back to the communities we serve. So I think you have to just find new ways to do the things you have already done really well. And it may not look and feel the same, but your employees will still feel connected to you. We use a saying here: when you do what's right for the employee 100% of the time, the right results will follow. And so it's like, what is right for this employee? And it may be different for each one. So it's a great time to ask your team, what can I do as your leader to help you stay passionate and connected at the credit union? And listen to the answer and follow through. So quick tips.
That's awesome, Sean. I just was listening to a webinar with Christine Hadid, and she runs a program called Student Made. And it started as a cleaning program, then it went into a leadership for students, for young adults. And the one thing that she talked about was teams, is having a meeting that has nothing to do with work. Like if you have a team, it's okay to say, this meeting is a half an hour and we're only just going to talk about our passions or our frustrations or whatever it might be. And it was really interesting, because we're tired of Zooms, right? We're tired of WebExes, but sometimes people just want that one-on-one with their team. So you're spot on. Hey, Carrie, you know what? When everything happened with the pandemic, you have kind of a double focus on the focus of your employees, but also all of a sudden, all of the restaurant business that you had shut down. That had to have been something that you just went, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So did you have a lot of team members reaching out to you with the same questions, and how did you help yourself sleep at night?
Yeah, well, I probably shouldn't say beer, but I'm gonna say beer. It's a pretty good health sleep aid. Yeah, no, we certainly had to pivot our business rather quickly. And so what we were able to do, luckily for us, is, with our restaurant going down, we were able to transition a bunch of our folks to work out at our big brewery in Comstock to sort of save some of their jobs. But in order for us to sort of stay connected and keep folks, we instituted something called the Brew Buddy system. So folks from different departments ended up having, they had brew buddies. They came up with what they wanted their volunteer opportunities to do for the year. And they would normally do that inside of your team. So my HR department would do, a volunteer day. But in order to sort of drive that engagement across our company, we decided to disperse that. They had to do socially distanced volunteer, activities they could do socially distanced. But they did that with some brew buddy teams. So someone from sales was paired with someone from production, for example, or someone from hospitality and someone from IT. So folks that they wouldn't normally work with, or that, frankly, that they don't see either on their manufacturing line, or on a Zoom call every day. So that was something that was really helpful. We really like to be active at our brewery. That's something that we really like. So we did a whole lot of I'll meet you at the dog park for this meeting. We got creative, to Sean's point of keeping some traditions, right? We got creative with that. We had, locked down the brewery for tours, for example. We love to welcome the public to our space and show off our space. And so we couldn't do that. So we transitioned to virtual tours. And then we got everybody in all sorts of departments involved. So instead of just my tour team, brewers would get to hop on the Zoom and talk about, in the middle of brewing, for example, or our packaging lines. So we really tried to broaden the programs we already had to be more inclusive and broader, and thought about that intentionally, as opposed to what's one person's individual job title. We really intentionally looked at how do we spread this work out to have a broader base of people included and engaged.
I love the fact that you said you invited people in that had not been able to be a part before. What did you find that feedback was from, let's say, IT in a tour, as an example?
Sure. It's been fantastic. I think really what's been so nice is seeing folks learn from each other. I mean, we have a lot of really great, passionate, smart folks who work here, but seeing them learn from each other has been really heartwarming. And like, well, I didn't know. And you make the connections of like, oh, my sister's mom's your, brother's dad's cousin, or you make those small, or I went to this high school and so did you. Or I know this person. So that's been really nice to see them make those personal connections and learn more about the broad side, like the broad industry that we cover.
That's awesome, Carrie. One of the things that I think we learn about is just what Carrie talked about. There's all of a sudden new acronyms that we hear, new things that are happening in our organizations, or maybe we heard about them before, but we really didn't quite know what to focus on or who to call. So last week we talked a little bit about mental health and our own self-care that we need. And 51% of people are reporting that there's a worse mental health feeling at work since COVID-19 started. I don't think there's anybody that is on the line here that hasn't had a night or a day where all of a sudden there was apprehension. There is a feeling of, I don't know. And so when you don't know, that turns into mental health challenges if you don't communicate and get help. And one of the things that I have seen over and over and over again is the acronym EAP. And on the last call, there were people that said, what is an EAP? And Grant, we're going to kick it off to you because I know that EAPs for many people, including my family, have been just wonderful in helping us bridge the gap. Grant, what is an EAP?
So EAP literally stands for Employee Assistance Program, and there are many of them throughout the country and throughout our region and state. One of them that I'm most intimately familiar with is HelpNet, which is a sort of a subset of Bronson as an organization, but they provide employee emotional support, support for families and employees in many aspects of life. So I'll say historically, I've worked at Bronson for maybe 14, 15 years, and in the early days that I was here, the EAP was this tool that for a long time I think was misused, right? It often became a part of a disciplinary process, or sort of like the last chance element of the workplace. So if an employee was struggling, the EAP was this thing that we would offer to help them kind of hopefully steer themselves back on course. Well, it's taken on an entirely new life in the last few years, and is really being used in a much more productive and proactive way. So it's a contracted service that someone like Bell's or consumers would hire and provide for free to their employees and their employees' families. And I've described it sometimes as a version of a 211, an internal 211. So they can't solve all the problems, but they can make connections with legal services or financial services. I think some of the folks on this call also participate in our regional ERN, the Employee Resource Network, which is another sort of version of a similar thing. But it's a tool. It's a tool to help people, and I think what you're going to hear me say a few times today when I talk is that everyone's needs are a little bit different, and so this is a tool that we can use to help suss out the individual needs of the human being who might be struggling right now, or might just need someone to talk to, because my needs are not the same as your needs, Lynn, and those are not the same as Sean's needs, and this ERN can help make relevant connections to solve problems.
That's awesome, Grant. And Amy, with On-Site Wellness, you represent so many companies. What is it that you try to educate to the employers to help the employees know that it's even there?
Right. Well, as someone who provides wellness solutions to organizations, I mean, one of the things we love to do is actually to partner with that employee assistance program if the client has that as well, because they can bring professional services that we can't do, right? They have those counselors on site, those certified, whether it's a social worker, a psychologist, the legal help. And so we find that partnering with those employee assistance programs are key, because as we work with the employees, we may find that we're kind of out of our lane, right? Like we have a lane we try to stay in, and those employee assistance programs can be a great resource for us to refer people to if, if we're seeing they have needs that we can't fulfill. The other thing we also love to use them for is their educational component. So maybe there's topics we can bring in on, and I know we're going to talk a little bit, and it kind of leads into this supporting managers, because quite honestly, there are programs oftentimes within that employee assistance program that can train managers to help their own people, right? So are we utilizing it not just from an individual standpoint, but are we utilizing it as an organization to bring in the services and some things that, maybe that middle management level or upper management level folks need to learn in order to help those who report to them. So, there's a lot of levels within that EAP that can be really beneficial.
Have you found, Amy, that there's this pause of when everything started to happen, the support that's needed, not only for the managers you just spoke about, but the employees, it's hard to discuss. The graphic right now shows how it's uncomfortable to talk about. We laugh about finances are uncomfortable to talk about, right? At consumers, you feel like there's no one to talk to. So that's really what the EAP helps to do is
right. It can help give you those. It's exactly it. I mean, they can help give you those talking points. I know, for an example, from my end, we've had to train our staff on how to have conversations with employees sometimes, specifically around suicide. If we get a notification from an employee that says they've thought about suicide, we brought in a professional to train them how to have that conversation. So are you giving your management level folks the tools and the tricks and the talking points in order to have these conversations with people, not to be afraid to have, I think we're afraid to have these conversations sometimes. And so it's so important. There are resources out there, whether it's your employee assistance program that might be able to help you, is it mental health first aid? That's another great tool and resource for training managers and how to have these conversations around mental health. I think for me, when I think about mental health and mental health in the workplace, we have no problem talking about sick time, like I'm ill. I have cancer, I have heart disease, I need to have a surgery. Those conversations don't seem hard for people to have. But when they're saying, I need a break because mentally I can't do this anymore, we can't have that conversation. And so until that mental health conversation becomes like having a conversation around our physical health is where we need to get to. So how do we train our employees to be okay with that conversation? And it's a tough one, but it'll take time and consistent training on it.
Well, and I think that's where, asking for help comes in. And Sean, I'm going to touch base with you quick and say, when there's mental health that comes into play, it's not just about mental health. It's what are the habits that have started to happen in remote work that then lead to a deterioration of wellness because maybe you've been not moving as much. So, I know for me personally, from March till about November, there was just quite a bit of sitting and in front of a computer, right? And we talked last week, you can easily go back to that video to see some of the things that were given to how to make sure you move. But when you talk about wellness, Sean, it's not just about physical or mental. It's really such a combination. And I think you really know how to help people get there.
Yeah, I think with wellness, it's helping each person discover their why. right? Because everybody's why for needing to be well is different, especially now, right? My why for needing to be well now might be look and feel a little different than, the why 2 years ago. So, I look back at the beginning of COVID-19 and when I was working remote, and I didn't sleep well for 47 days straight. I did not sleep more than 3 to 4 hours at night. And my well-being was really struggling, and I had to really dig in and try to figure out my why am I struggling, and why is this affecting my well-being? And then finally my husband says to me, he goes, I know your why. You're sleeping at work, right? And I would never turn it off. So from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, I'm working and never turning it off. And so I had to learn to set boundaries in my own life. So that's my own personal experience. So then I thought to myself, if I'm having this struggle, guess what? Other employees are having the struggle too. And it was really about creating some awareness around well-being. So that's what we started doing, was an educational series. Really, it was easy because our EAP had some offerings already. And it was about mindfulness and well-being. And then we started doing like, hey, take some steps and send us some pictures. And hey, make sure your finances are in order, and let's talk about that. Let's check on, where you are. So, it's really about helping people understand their own why, and really giving them an avenue in which to do so. So we actually switched our EAP provider last year to one that offers a significant amount of visits if needed. We've seen utilization go way up, because one of the things we know is 3 visits is never going to be enough to solve your problem. And then you just kind of create this other problem of a financial struggle of paying those co-pays, if they want to continue. So I think it's really looking at your organization and trying to figure out how to help your employees find their why, and giving them a mechanism and a communication channel so they can do that. So we offer coaching through our wellness provider. We offer all the visits through our EAP. And then in addition to that, our HR team started doing check-ins with every single employee, just checking in. Hey, how are you? Because loneliness is loneliness, no matter how you slice it. And so, it's and the loneliness can cause all kinds of well-being issues. So that's been our mechanism, but I think it really just drills down to helping people find their why they need to be well, or why they're struggling with not being well.
Carrie, have you found that, the well-being of your employees, has there been that up and down that you've been looking at, and how to really help each one individually? That's what Sean's talking about.
Yeah, for us, I often talk about it as like we run a lot of different businesses underneath the Bell's umbrella, right? Whether it's restaurant, store, admin, we have 150 employees who don't even live in Michigan. So it's been a challenge. Something we started doing we call it kind of our grounding exercise. We start all of our meetings with a safety moment. Those safety moments used to be physical safety. It might be car safety for my sales team. Those have all now intentionally transitioned. We've built a big library to more personal safety, mental health, those pieces. So that's how we start every single meeting, no matter how big or how small. We start our meetings with a safety moment, and we've transitioned those so it becomes easier to talk about it. You hear your leadership team talking about it. Someone like Sean sharing her personal story makes it seem easier, certainly for others then to share theirs. So that was a small tweak that we made in, a program that we already had. One of the other pieces that we did was institute what we call we call it our players only. So no management. So it's just our middle management. They meet on occasion, and they then get to present to our senior leadership team. And our commitment to them is that we will pick up at least one of those initiatives, or one of those, issues that they're lifting up to us. We're going to pick it up and apply resources right away. And so that's not influenced then by what I think is important or my personal interactions I'm having, but we can really hear, particularly from that middle management who sits in this place of, the slide that you showed, like they're more likely to talk to their direct leader, likely than calling, my HR manager, for example. So they're just closer to them.
Grant, you must be, you work in healthcare. So on top of everything that we're talking about on our retail businesses and finances, my head just kind of wants to like go right to my heart with what you have seen on a day-to-day basis starting back last spring.
Yeah, this has been a dynamic environment for the last 12 months for sure, and it's you know, again, I think the EAP has played a big role in helping us support employees both on-site and off-site. You know, we went from, so this place employs about 9,000 people. The hospital that I'm standing in right now has, on any given day, 3,000 to 4,000 employees. A year ago would have been on campus. About 1,000 people were moved to off-campus in the span of a few weeks, and that EAP has aided us in supporting the employees off-site. But we've also, and what's that old saying? Like, desperation is the mother of invention. So the circumstances that we are in have forced this large employer who is historically pretty conservative. I mean, healthcare is generally a pretty conservative industry. We've been forced to think differently about the way we do everything, and I think it's forced a lot of our leadership to get comfortable with things that would have previously been uncomfortable, and to give our employees some more latitude in the way that they work, choices as to whether they want to be on site or off site, but also how they engage with one another and how our leaders engage with our teams. You know, it's been very rigid and very structured for a really long time, and allowing our leaders to engage with their teams differently, whether it's a virtual social hour, or, you know, so we've built some on-site like soothing room situations, right? So with white noise and soft music and massage chairs and refreshments and snacks and things like that for the folks who remain on campus. It's really required 100 different tactics to keep people engaged in their wellness.
Well, I love the fact that what you're saying is just keep trying new things too, that it's okay, and then listening for that feedback. Amy, is that what you found out from the teams that you work with?
Yeah, I think, you know, every organization's a little different, right? I mean, based on size of the organization, and are they on site, or are they all now remote, or are they, you know, it is going to be so different for every single organization. You know, were they, like, you know, on the front line, so to speak, or were they not, and how people handled it. And so I know every single one of them handled it differently. I know we had a lot of influx of more mental health programming, and really a lot of conversations around that, which was good. I'm actually happy that mental health conversation kind of got pushed forward, kind of like technology did, right? Like, we all were like, oh yeah, Zoom's kind of cool, you know, we do that once in a while, and now here we all are, like, Zoom experts, right? So I'm hoping that this, you know, this mental health awareness that we have been kind of thrust into will continue to be on the forefront with a lot of our organizations. And not that the physical, you know, all the well-being is so interrelated, right? We can't talk about mental health without talking about our physical health or our nutrition or how we do stress management or our financial well-being. They're so all interrelated. And I loved what Sean said, in that every person has a different need, right? Like, it's so organizations need to be aware that not all of their employees are, you know, in the same boat in this storm. So, you know, listening and being aware of that. And I really think, from a wellness standpoint, to be conscious that, you know, wellness or well-being, whatever word you want to use, is not just taking a walk at lunch. You know, it is, like Sean said, it's setting boundaries around my work from home, you know, my work from home office, or is it more flexible work scheduling because I now have kids around, or, you know, is it more around mental health? It's going to be so different from everyone. So it's just really thinking broad term on what is well-being and what is wellness, and then trying to approach that almost on an individual scale with your employees.
You know, Sean mentioned the word loneliness, and especially in the remote environment, engaging our teams can help really combat that loneliness. There's one thing that our marketing team does once a week that we started, and we play a game called Code Names that you can get online. It's free, and it's it's like a challenging, fun word play game, and it takes about a half an hour. But we religiously do that on Fridays, and it's something that breaks the ice, that helps engage and helps us laugh. Because there's, every single person on this line knows the stress that's coming with every day-to-day things that you're doing. And if you're not in person, that communication breaks down very quickly, or it can. Sean, what are some of the ways that you are engaging people? It shows here that 78% of employees reported they're more likely to stay with an employer because of their benefits program. We know that's huge with all of the groups that are on today. But how are you helping with that engagement, not only on the benefit side of being able to do the things you talked about with EAP, but also just in team building?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's different. I mean, across our organization, I see it happening in different ways, and I think that's good because what we know is not every team is the same and not every person is the same. So I think as leaders, our best way to keep our teams engaged is to have conversations with our team and say, how do we stay engaged together as a team? Maybe it's trivia, maybe it's sometimes just making eye contact. We can never, ever underestimate the power of eye contact. And you can't necessarily make good eye contact on Zoom, but that's way better than a phone call, right? Because things get lost in translation when you can't see someone's face and how they're reacting. Also, meeting in person is great, but if you're wearing a mask, it's really difficult to read my facial expressions. So I think engaging with your team and having strong conversations and coming up with some good playing ground, like this is how we're going to operate in this environment, and then being vulnerable and transparent as a leader, and being okay with saying, how am I failing you? Or is there some way that I'm not serving you in the way that you need to be served? Because my job as a servant leader is to be here for you and help you have the best experience possible. And I need to be okay when you tell me I'm not doing that. And so, I had that conversation with my team last week, and one of my team members laughed, and they're like, whatever, you're HR, like we're HR, we know, but we can't just assume, right? We can't just assume because we're HR, even our own teams are as engaged as they could be. And so I had to have that conversation. So I think, when you're talking about how to engage your team in remote ways, the best thing you can do as a leader is ask the question, and also don't give up. Like if an employee is introverted and they're not necessarily comfortable on Zoom and you got to kind of pull them out of their shell, keep strong in your pursuit of understanding them, because they're the worker that will get lost, because they're not the squeaky wheel, because they're not speaking up, and they will get lost and they will feel lost and they will disengage. And while we all know unemployment is high, there are still many jobs, and your teams are being pursued relentlessly. Whether you believe that or not, they are being pursued relentlessly for new opportunities. So one of my employees just went to Bronson Healthcare last week. I'll just put that out there. So, but that's right. That's reality. And, but it's great. And you want them to be successful, and if moving on is the right thing for them, but you want to make sure you don't want them making that decision because you didn't engage them and you didn't have that conversation with them.
Gary, have you found that there have been readings, like you mentioned earlier on the call, that you're doing readings with your team? Have you found in the last 14, 15 months that what you're reading and what you're taking in is helping focus on the remote employee and keeping them engaged?
Yeah, I think we've struck a balance here with doing some reading around, yes, certainly engagement pieces, and then also trying to better understand some of the pressures, whether that be political pressures that we're seeing in our country and around us, racism, those pieces that have really, also have a sometimes dire effect on our employees, their families, how they're feeling, how they show up to work, how they're personally how they're personally feeling. So we've we've been doing a lot of balancing between what I would call sort of leadership and engagement, and then some of the harder work around, anti-racism is the topic we're reading right now for our SLT, for example. And I will continue to echo Sean's sentiment that, taking time to personally, pursue, I love that word, Sean, pursue, your employees to understand what it is that they need and how you can help. And approaching that in a way that nothing's off limits, right? Nothing's off limits. One of the most creative solutions we came up with was, we ended up in a place where we had these cars that, think we used to use them for sales and marketing. And we didn't need them, as we're not servicing bars and restaurants in the same way anymore. We didn't have as much use for them. And so we turned those into rideshare pieces where like somebody could offer some rideshare opportunities because we had people working from home more and they couldn't, a spouse needed the car, or so you just have to look at the resources you have around you and think about how you repurpose them, I think is another important piece there. We do, we use, to Sean's point, we do a normal, we call it our family meeting. We did that virtually this year. Obviously hospitality, food and beer is a big part of our business, sharing that together. We weren't able to do that. So we put together a cookbook. We asked everybody to submit recipes, like their grandma's, biscuit recipe. And we were able to do that, and we shared those in the packages then. So it was a really fun collaborative way for us to share food and beer, but in a different way.
I do like, that being able to share food and beer is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You talk about those conversations that you're having, and I know, Grant, you really do focus with your employees about open, transparent conversations. Inside the chat and also on email, we'll be sending out the employee benefits guide for 2021 for remote workers, so you're going to get that. Grant, what is it that you're doing that is helping keep those conversations not only open and transparent, but ongoing and having people feel that they're being listened to?
So many things. One thing that jumps out, there's another team within the organization that's working on administering this tool called the Intercultural Development Inventory. And it's a mechanism for sort of evaluating where we all are in terms of our openness to change and recognition of everyone's differences and embracing that everyone comes with a different set of life experiences, which is what's shaping their needs and expectations about the world. And I think we're using that. I'm seeing that being used as a tool to open up those conversations at the higher levels of the organization. You had that slide a few slides ago about the percent of individuals who are open to challenging conversations at different layers of the institution. And I think we've found over the years that it's one thing for an employee to speak up and voice their concerns. It's another thing entirely for that to be heard and acted upon. And opening up the dialogue at the decision maker level of an organization and creating an awareness around the very real needs of many human beings that might not be the same as mine, right? Middle-aged white dude with a decent income who's had a ton of privilege in his life hasn't faced many challenges. That is not the reality for a lot of our employees. And I think we're seeing it, we're hearing it. I'm hearing it even in this conversation. We're talking about wellness and well-being in a very, very different way than we would have 5 or 10 years ago. It's not just about eating more vegetables and walking around the block a few times. It's about understanding what mental health needs are and what those impacts can be, and what resources are out there in the community to help people address them. So I'll try to sum this up quickly. Everyone's definition of health is different, right? And you've heard Sean say this, we've all said this during this conversation. And to get at that on an individual level allows us to have a meaningful impact across more members of our employee population, right? Rather than trying to cast a big blanket solution that we hope might grab a dozen people, when you can get down to that granular level and understand the needs of the individual, and you can start aligning the resources that already exist in the organizations and the communities to help that individual thrive. So are we asking the right questions even when we enter these conversations about health and well-being? And what do we understand what the individual's definition, personal definition is?
Well, I think you really, and I hope you elaborate a little bit on this, because what you talked about knowing where your employees are, and have you asked that question? How have you gone about doing that, Grant? You mentioned your program. Is it a team building effort? Is it a group you brought from outside to help?
It's a little bit of all of that. Again, I'm speaking from this organization that has so many people. It requires a bunch of different tactics, but I'll say, I'll take the food service department as an example. We reorganized our leadership structure in the food service department a year or two ago, and we did so to ensure that the number of direct reports that each supervisor had was basically cut in half. So we promoted quite a few people, but we also gave every member of our team a more direct line to somebody who can have a positive impact, who can make a decision for them, who can lift up a problem. And it really is that. It's really that. It's cultivating those relationships. It's ensuring that every member of the team has a resource to go to and that they can start to develop those trusting relationships. Everyone's not going to respond to a question, right? Somebody mentioned introverts versus extroverts a little bit ago. If I walk into a room and say, hey, what do you guys need? A couple people might speak up and a couple people are going to stare at the ceiling. And so when I walk around, I do my daily rounds now through the kitchens. I don't just ask questions. I try to engage everyone in a conversation, because what will come out in a conversation is often going to be different than what's going to come out in response to a question. So having meaningful dialogue versus just asking questions. Does that answer?
Absolutely. I think it gives all of us a great thought process on thinking differently, especially with remote work, but also just in how can they make a difference? How can they make an impact? And is anybody listening? Amy, have you found that with that you work with, that and I think Sean hit it on the head when she said there's personal, you've got to get down to the personal level with the employees and with the employers.
Yeah,
Amy,
totally. And I think it's been our challenge because, with COVID and wellness programming, we've kind of been almost removed a little bit, right? We've had to really push more to completely online programming because many of our clients still to this day won't bring us back on site yet, and that's okay and totally understandable. So being creative in how we can reach those individuals and so on has been a little more challenging. But it's still so incredibly important, and so we continue as an organization to think about our programming and how can we drill this down and get to the people and have what we would consider best practices still when we're having an online program, right? So it's an everyday challenge. But I'm listening to Grant talk, and I think, Grant, I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think you said 3,000 to 4,000 employees, right? So give or take, I'm looking at this as a small business owner, and it's really interesting to listen to Grant talk. And I mean, even with my smaller organization of 25 employees, we're doing a lot of those same things along the line. And I think it doesn't matter the size of your organization. Yes, your resources might be different, but the advantage we have is we're a smaller organization, so we can get to all those little individual people really easily, right? So we're still doing quarterly engagement surveys, and we're watching, the responses over the last year and what's happening with those, and asking the questions. And we just recently had our human resources person talk to each person individually, and really trying to get with them and say, what's happening, what's going on, do you have the tools that you need to do your job, and what, because everybody's needs are a little different. We keep saying that over and over again. So, We have a funny joke in my family about you need the right tool for the job, right? We joke about that with power washers and ladders and, lawnmowers or whatever, you need the right tool to do the job. But I think it applies here in the workforce too. It's like everybody needs a little something different to make them successful at work. And so without getting down and drilling down as much as we can to that individual, and making sure they have whatever those tools are that they need to continue to feel successful in the situation that we're in.
I'll tell you, one of the things that this brings to light is the fact that, there is that ramping up and ramping down, and it's being able to grant. It sounds to me like you ramped down a little bit with the restructuring that then helped people be able to ramp up their own leadership skills, which is just amazing. So, and that's what we're doing, Amy. That's what you just talked about. One of the really neat things that we're going to do today is listen to you. So if you have anything that you would like to ask the team right now that maybe you're having difficulties with, or you just have some thoughts, please send it in the chat and we'll get those questions rocking. We're going to start what we're calling speed round, which is really fun. We're going to start with Carrie. And basically what we really want to know is collaborative problem solving. Have you, especially, when I think about this, I can close my eyes back to March and really think about how many of the intense meetings there were when you had to problem solve what happened when COVID first shut down the nation. Since then, there's been so many different ways that we're problem solving. Carrie, let's hear some of yours. Hold on a minute. You're on mute. Adrian, can you? Oh, there you go, Carrie.
I gotcha. Sorry. We've transitioned to, for our most senior leaders, so that's the 4 of us, myself included, we have a daily huddle at 9 a.m. I mean, we went from a weekly meeting where sometimes we prioritize that in our busy days to we have a daily huddle at 9 a.m. check-in, and that's where we know we can bring things to do some of the collaborative decision-making pieces there. One of the other pieces we convened was we have a specific kind of COVID-19 team. Ironically enough, it has 19 members. That was not intentional. From all different sort of facets, whether that's safety and facilities and department leads, and that really would need to respond in an event, let's say, or as we get a new executive order, and how do we get compliant around that, and how quickly, and how do we communicate. So we convene that meeting once a week. It was almost daily, and we've been able to cut that back to once a week as we've put tools and systems in place. So our meeting structure has changed. The makeup of our meeting structure has changed. In addition to utilizing some of the technology resources. So we are doing all sorts of sending out this poll, like, okay, here's these 4 things. Which of these is the most important? Do we need to get done? And trying to get back some rapid responses from our team so that we can focus on the most important pieces. Lastly, I would say, as far as collaborative problem solving goes, we've really had to get creative with things like, we have a group called S&OP, so Sales Ops and Marketing, or Sales Ops and Production, excuse me. And that had a lot to do with how do we respond to orders coming in and, changing all of that. And that team has been able to reach a greater level of efficiency during COVID than we ever had before then, because it's necessary, right? I've been so heartened with seeing people rally around a problem, right? Like they get really engaged and rally around wanting to solve a problem. Like, hey, we don't have enough beer, or not too much, or whatever the case may be. And that's been really great to see them. That group in particular, which is a collaborative group across, they used to meet individually. We've broken down a lot of those silos and have a lot of many more cross-functional meetings.
Carrie mentioned about the quick polls, which I think are absolutely fascinating. I think that's a great concept to take to any place that you're working, to find out what the buzz is that's going on. And then I think the one thing that you also said was breaking down silos, and that means collaboration. Amy, what have you found in your work?
I think the thing that I kind of mentioned this just in my last thing when I said, you know, we had to transition. I mean, the name of our company is On-Site Wellness, and so a vast majority of, our work was going on-site to locations and feeling that that was super important. And how did we had to quickly transition. Yes, we had the technology to do so, which was to our benefit, but watching my team go, all right, this is what we used to do on site, and here's how we need to make it work online. And really, it was so fun to watch them actually really brainstorm and come up with what have become some really awesome solutions that I think will continue. Yes, we want to get back in front of our, employees at our clients and all of that. But I think there are some really great things that have come out of this from a programming standpoint. I'll use live webinars as an example. Here we are, right, on a live webinar. And my team, I mean, I remember saying to them a year or so ago, like, have we ever thought about just doing a live webinar across all of our clients, and how cool would that be? And it never happened. Guess what? Here we are. We were forced to actually put together some programming, and we offered it across the board to all of our clients. And and it was a webinar that really spoke to everybody, right? We did kind of a series of webinars, and will that continue? I kind of hope it does, right? It's a great way for us to get in front of all our clients at one time. And give them resources all at once. And so the other thing that has brought is, yes, we're based in Grand Rapids, but we're actually gaining clients across the country, because now we can actually, do the services, from here anywhere. So that's super exciting.
It really has been a game changer in the sense of content, building content library that helps people succeed. Grant, with what you do on a day-to-day basis, what have you been seeing that has really been a game changer in collaboration for your organization?
I want to build on what Carrie said, which is, I think, just such a critical thing to point out. I experienced something in the last 12 months that I have not experienced in over a decade of working in this organization. In the throes of the onset of the pandemic, obviously our business shifted dramatically. The things that make a healthcare system money, we just flat out couldn't do. The number of rooms that were open were sliced by probably 80%, and everything we were doing was non-revenue generating and focused on a very small number of people. So we had a new CEO at the same time who's incredible, and he didn't flinch. He took everyone across a few segments of the leadership team, basically threw us all in a barrel of monkeys, and we came out in groups of 5 to 10 with people we had never worked with before. I ended up in a group of 8 humans who I probably interacted with half a dozen times in total in 10 years of working here. And our task was pretty straightforward. Figure out how to keep this ship afloat and make it more viable going forward. And not only was it beyond successful, but I've watched those relationships that I and my colleagues built allow us to make other decisions and changes so much faster than we would have before. I know exactly who to connect with. We have a relationship that we built during a tumultuous time, which makes it that much stronger, right? And maybe even cooler, I'm watching all of these leaders, myself included, implement the same practice with our teams across the organization. So now this problem-solving solution that broke down all these silos, as Carrie said, and there are many in all of our institutions, it's created a leaner, more efficient institution. And in some, maybe many cases, we are now able, so there's not as many people and not as much business as there once was. We're able to reinvest savings and new revenues in the human beings who are here. So we're buoying the lives of the people we rely on as a direct result of this collaborative problem-solving exercise.
Grant, and it's heartwarming to hear from you, because I think that people hear and read, stories all the time about the fact that there's such sadness and crisis management. And it sounds to me like, yes, absolutely, the crisis management was there, but in the long run, what ends up happening is, as human beings, we come together to make things better. So what a wonderful story. Sean, the same thing. We really had such a drastic change in our work immediately, and that collaborative problem solving is something that you had always been working on, but boy, did things change quick for us.
Sure. Yeah, we went from, 20 plus retail offices open to 0 retail offices open, in 80% of our employees working remote within 2 weeks. And so the good news is we had made some good investments in technology with our ITM technology, where a member can get served through a machine with a live human, and it minimizes contact and risk and all of that good stuff. So we already had all of that technology, but transitioning everybody to that technology immediately certainly had its pains. And so, it was pretty exciting to see how all of a sudden we had all of these employees who would have been displaced. I mean, they really would have. Our retail offices were closed and they would have been displaced. But we literally had a collaborative process of having every single person reassigned in a new department, new task, breaking down walls within 2 weeks. So nobody was unemployed. And, I'm just super proud of that, because it took a lot of managers with a lot of collaboration and working together to make that happen. And it's still happening today, even as we look at new opportunities that were found for employees and love the department they were assigned to, and now they're working in those departments full time. So I think, we were forced to break down silos, and it's probably been the best thing that happened. The other learning piece of this, because you guys have all said great things, and I think they apply. But the one thing that I've really learned is we're in a culture of instant gratification. Like, everybody wants instant gratification. And one of the things that I've learned through all this and working with our managers on is sometimes it's okay not to react instantly to every problem, that it's okay to take a step back and say to your teammate or your direct report, or even the person you report to, when they come to you with something big, you don't have to have an answer today. It's okay to say, it sounds like you've had a lot of time to think about this, but I'm just learning about it for the first time. So let me take a minute and think about it, and let's come back together and problem solve it. And I think in this world that we live in with all this technology, and we're doing everything on Zoom, and we feel like we've got to be like bam, 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 and answer all the questions, it's really important that we also take time to be mindful and think about things before we react. And sometimes that's easier when you're on site, right? Because you can go, let's just take a pause. But it's difficult to walk away from a video and go, I need to take a pause. Let's put that together later. But I think we're learning that, and that's still a collaborative problem-solving piece as an organization that we will continue to work on, because it's important.
I am, Sean, going to with you because you actually started the conversation about people moving to different departments, doing something different, and they're staying in those departments. I mean, I think the one thing that this has opened up for all of us is, boy, the careers of today are different than even 14 months ago. The fact that there is remote work has people thinking differently about their own careers. Sean, what have you found that is helping keep those career pathways open? I think it was Amy who mentioned, my goodness, no, actually it was you, Sean. I think you threw a shot across the bow to Grant about, an employee that was that's now working at another wonderful organization. But how is it that those career pathways stay open, and that the changing work environment is also open too?
Yeah, it's really important that we don't lose sight of employee development, even though we're not coming together in the same ways. So, what's really been interesting through this is that the career opportunities actually have grown in our organization as a result. So who would have thought, many people think our teller plus technology is you've replaced people with machines. It's not true. It actually takes almost double the number of people to serve that technology as it did prior, when we had people in teller lines. So but it's a huge career opportunity. And before COVID, we had, I think, less than a dozen people in that department. Now it's a department of 30 plus people. So, it's really looking at how can we versus, oh my gosh, we have this problem in front of us. And now this teller role within the office is transitioned. How do we create great career paths? So, it really took a lot of teamwork and collaboration and communication, like talking to employees, being transparent about the opportunities in front of them, giving them the opportunity to grow into those and apply for them and try them. We have a little try before you buy opportunity in our organization. I like to call it, and we call it grab an assignment, which is really like an internal internship where they can, learn from a department for 90 days, leave their current job. But then if it's not a permanent role, or they don't love it, they just get to go back to their job, but they're richer because of it. And I think creating opportunities where employees can learn, and being okay with them shifting, to those opportunities to learn, it's a big sacrifice for you as a leader, but in the long run, you're getting a more educated, rich, knowledge, full employee on your team. And, a career ladder is gone. Right? I mean, we have to, the days of wanting to climb a ladder are gone. It's really more of this lattice work, and employees can move all over the place and grow and stay with your organization much longer. We have low turnover, and I love that, except for the one that went to Bronson. But other than that,
let's head on over to Grant. Hey, we do have some questions on chat, which we'll wrap up with at the end. So please feel free to share them. Right now, we're talking about how to keep those career pathways open. Sean, I love the fact that you said the ladder is gone. It's just such a different work environment now. Grant, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, very much so. And to be clear, I think, Sean, we've probably traded a few employees. And
I'm sure we have. I just think it's a little funny.
Region, right?
It's fresh. It's a little fresh. No, I'm just teasing. It's a great opportunity. You guys have amazing opportunities there. I just like to make a little fun of it since we're both on this call. So
I think it's great, and I think it's actually a really beautiful example of what we see internally in this organization. Nearly any job that exists in the world exists in healthcare and many of our industries. And so it is less, as Sean said, it's less about climbing that traditional hierarchical ladder into a leadership role within one silo, and more about developing skills that translate across many different business environments. So my hope would be that Sean built up this individual and her organization. They've learned lots of great, valuable skills, and now we're going to take advantage of that. And we'll probably trade back at some point, right? But it really is a matter of giving the individual opportunities to develop skills and along the way build wealth. So in some of our departments, we've removed a former barrier with a limited number of positions for growth, right? So previously, say we only had 20 cook positions in our food service department. Now anyone can learn to cook, but in order to do that, you have to take some classes, learn some skills, demonstrate competencies. And then as you move into that new role, you make a little bit more money. But what's really important, again, as Sean said, is that you've built your toolbox. You've added some knowledge and some skills. And whether you stay cooking forever or you move into IT or the lab, you've learned some customer service. You've learned how to work with teams. You've learned how to learn, which is a skill into itself. Yes, we're seeing some of that.
Grant, it sounds to me, with all of the different options that are available, that career pathway is something that's just open for everybody. And I love the fact that you're saying, try something different if that's what you want to do, right? Carrie, have you found the same at Bell's? Is it going in a way that I loved your rideshare discussion. That totally is a whole different new way to utilize something that you use traditionally for sales and service.
Sure. Yeah. And like Grant, we run many different businesses under Bell's. So it has been we went so far as to try to break it down in the simplest terms. So for our, unfortunately displaced, hospitality folks, we tried to break it down in the simplest terms of like, do you really like math? Do you really like science? Do you really like to build things? Like, so that we could, and we have placed them, I mean, we have someone from our, what would have been our key partnerships and promotions. So think like, they helped secure our sponsorship with the Red Wings. She's now working on our data insights team. She's a math wizard. Who knew? We were like, tried to break it down into some small buckets of like, I didn't look at any resumes. When we placed those folks, I was like, I don't care, right? It doesn't matter. Help me understand what you want to learn more about. We needed more data analysis to understand our changing business. We needed more communication and better communication throughout our company. We definitely needed more training and content building. And we have taken people from all over and we just looked at what our business needs were, tried to break it down in simple terms. And we have put people in those places. And to Sean's point, some of them are never going back. Never going back. Love data insights. Who knew? It's been great.
Well, and don't you just hear that the excitement that comes from you, Carrie, is what is building. And I think that that's what employees also need to hear. Like, oh my gosh, I can do this. I don't have to be shy about saying I might want to try something different.
Yeah. Or probably one of my favorite examples, long time, bar manager downtown, favorite of everybody's. And he's now working and leading one of our packaging lines, and he loves it. He goes to work and he comes home at the same time every day. His wife loves it too, because he's not closing the bar, for example, right? And I got to keep a 10+ year employee who has fantastic natural leadership ability, but didn't know how to run a packaging line. But those are transferable skills.
Well, it sounds to me, Amy, that Carrie's talking right up your alley too, because you're talking with many small businesses. Have you found that all of them are trying to retain their employees, but also in a way that, there's obviously some can't be retained. Can they be switched and moved to a different position?
Yeah, I think all of our clients, to my knowledge, have done everything they can to kind of hold on to their folks, right, as best they can. I was at a webinar the other day and a company was talking about how they actually created they actually sourced out their employees to their clients. Which I thought was awesome. Like, their clients that they serve needed employees and their employees weren't working. So they literally kind of created a staffing company and were farming out their own employees to their clients. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. Like, all we want to do is keep our employees working, right? That's kind of was the main goal. And, I can't say that was one of my clients, but I thought, wow, that's an innovative thing that I've heard yet. And I've loved hearing the stories about people finding new passions, which is really what we're looking for. And I know, as a small company, we don't have as many opportunities in a small company as, I'm seeing it, but, I could go from bartending to packaging or something of that nature. And so, but I think one thing we're trying to do with our team is not to focus so much on, oh, you need wellness training or, something that's right down their alley, but to try to broaden those horizons. So for example, one of our team members is going to be doing a training on project management, and kind of just broadening those overall skills. So, as Grant said, I'd hate to lose my really great employees, but I hope that I've built them into being a better employee for somebody else if and when they choose to ever to leave us. I don't want to, lose any of them. But, we hope that we're building good, productive, efficient, fabulous workers that, those skills that they're learning here are transferable to something else. Well, I just want them to be successful. End of story, right?
And it sounds to me like bold. Be bold. Don't be afraid to ask if you feel like you have a passion for some place else, whether that be location and or just a hat to wear. I think that is just it's an exciting time for many of us. Now, I will say there is a question and it goes back to engagement. This comes from the chat. So whoever would like to answer, just raise your hand. And basically what it asks is the following. We are now going into our second year of living each day in a pandemic. And we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not quite there yet. What suggestions do you have for engagement if all of a sudden it feels like we're just doing the same thing over and over again as we go into the second year? Any ideas?
I can start if that's okay. I think it may seem tiresome to you to stay the course, engaging with your employees, but I think the best thing you can do as a leader is simply ask them. And I will just go back to that 100% of the time, because you hear the old adage, right? People don't leave companies, they leave managers. And I think if you're the leader in that organization and you feel tired by it, see if your employee also feels tired by it, because they may not, or they may, and then say, okay, how can we mix this up? Also, I think that guide, the 80 employee benefits ideas for remote workers, there's some fun ideas in there on how to engage people in new ways. But I think you have got to stay the course, and it may feel tiresome to you, but keep in mind, it's likely not tiresome to the people that you serve. And if you look at your employees as people you serve, and then simply ask, I think that's step one.
Carrie, what were you going to say?
So one of the things we challenge ourselves to do is to start with a blank calendar. So as we got to a point, I believe it was this, winter, just as we were heading into the dark winter and really became concerned about, our employees, we went through an exercise where as a whole team, we looked at our calendars and said, what really makes sense now? Not just what am I continuing, right? We had gotten to a point, but what really makes sense for us now? What meetings and who do we need to talk to drive the business? Not, am I part of the HR team, so I must have an HR meeting, at what cadence and why? So, and I think that really helped us to do that deliberate exercise of what am I getting value out of? What could be a report or an email versus a meeting? And then ask the question greater of who else could I bring into this meeting? Like, whose voice am I missing? And that was a pretty simple exercise for us, but it fundamentally changed my calendar, to looking more, becoming less reactionary in the middle of COVID and becoming more deliberately looking forward.
Well, I'll tell you, we have heard such wonderful ideas, and the discussion is so open and exciting. Let's do a little recap. If each one of you could tell us just a recap of final thoughts before we wrap up today. Thank everybody for listening in today. It's been a joy. Sean, why don't we start with you?
Well, first of all, my first recap is I'm on this call with some amazing people, and you forget about your tribe of connections until you hear them speak, and then I'm like, why are we not talking more? So that's the first thing. But what I will say is, as many things as I think we do well, we all have areas we can learn, and I have learned so much listening to both Grant and Carrie and Amy about some of the things that. My first thing is, I think consumers should farm me out to Bell's to be a bartender. I think I could do that, and it would be super fun. And we should be open-minded about that. But also, I loved the ideas about Grant saying, we have this program and we're really trying to figure out where people are and what their perspective is, and then how can we use that inclusion. I think we could implement that. And then the quick poll thing, I think that's amazing. So I've just learned so much myself. I've got a whole page of notes here. So, and I've been doing what I do for 27 years. So I just want to thank everybody for the perspective that they've shared, and you guys have helped me tremendously today. So hopefully our callers feel the same way.
Thank you, Sean. Amy, let's head to you. On-site wellness.
Well, I think, the theme that I kept hearing, I think all of us mentioned, and the thing that I had written down before this call even started today, was ask. Ask your managers, ask your people, what do you need? How are you doing? Listening with an empathetic ear. I said this at the end of the last webinar, I kind of mentioned it again, and that's, everybody's in their own boat rowing through this storm, and we all have our own challenges. And as we continue, just like the last question, it's like, here we are, a year in and looking forward, and how do we continue this? And I will just continue to say, ask, because how I'm feeling is not maybe the same as somebody else. And listen, be that servant leader, and listen and ask, how can I help?
Thank you, Amy. Grant with Bronson, take it away. What's your final thoughts?
So I had a thought while Carrie was talking, and at the risk of getting a little too Scandinavian or socially democratic, I have realized over the course of the last year, especially with all this remote work, that I and others around me are getting more done in a smaller period of time. And time, as I'm sure we've all learned, is maybe arguably the most valuable resource any of us have available. And I wonder if it might be time to think about giving some of that time back to people, especially as we come out of that just dreadfully dark period of the year, and things are going to start blooming, and people are going to want to get to the beer garden, maybe half-day Fridays or something, I think we should think about. And not all the way to a 30-hour work week, but just like a step in that direction.
That sounds awesome to me. I'll meet you at the beer garden, Grant. And Carrie, speaking, we all will. Speaking of, I have to say this, Sean, I can just see in my head, you're like a Cheers bartender and you're giving HR discussions, it's talks. I think it can work. I think you can do it. Carrie, if you'll take Sean for a day, she's in. So, but what have you found? What's your final takeaways?
Well, first of all, I'll hire Ann and Sean any day to come bartend. Oberon, the sun will come out on March 22nd, my friends. So I will be happy to see all of you, socially distanced, of course, and masked. I guess my real final thoughts are to find the small wins. I don't know that if I've mentioned that, but that is something, find something you're grateful for, share that, but find those small wins and share them at nauseum. That is one of the biggest, in my mind, one of the biggest ways that we combat all the challenges, all the doubt, all the things that our employees and ourselves frankly face, is find those small wins and share them.
I love that, Carrie. This in itself has been a big win for us and the community. And I cannot thank all of you enough, Sean and Grant and Carrie and Amy. Also, Adrienne is our producer. She's amazing. She just does wonderful work. So she's behind the scenes there. But thank you, Adrienne. We have had a wonderful series so far. First on self-care, then on team care. And Grant mentioned time and giving that time back. And we can smile and say, let's meet at the beer garden, which is a wonderful way to celebrate people and be together. The other way is through community. And what is it that we can do all together to advance our wellness by helping listen what the community is feeling and needing in your own neighborhoods? And it might just be your neighborhood that we're talking about. So we'll see you next week for community care on March 9th. Just a final thank you to our wonderful panel. It is wonderful to see smiling faces, but it's even more exciting to hear just the passion and excitement that we have for continuing wellness in our own organizations and in our lives. See you next week, Community Care on March 9th. I'm Lynn Jarman Johnson with Consumers Credit Union. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.